That is something that to me sounds so good, doesn't it? It's fresh. New song. It's a fresh way of praising and singing, and it comes from seeing things just a little bit differently than you did before. To say that the earth sings a new song means that the earth itself holds possibility and hope. Like our Creator, mercies new every morning. As we've been seeing through this series on permaculture, the design and systems of nature are perfect. Living things thrive when they are in balance. No wonder the earth sings. When things are allowed to do what they're created to do, to be who and what they are created to be, and when they stay within the natural order of God's design, yes, it's a new song. It's one of the reasons we're seeing creation right now struggling, because humans, not creation, not living things, humans have not worked within the natural order. We know this, yes? You're there, right? Yes. Yes. We've objectified, we've taken, we've wasted, and now creation suffers. All creation, us included. The thing is, the earth knows how to heal herself. Long after this planet becomes uninhabitable for humans, Earth will still be here, healing, restoring, renewing, singing her new song to the Lord. She doesn't need humans, we need her. Yes? So our only chance of being around for a substantial length of time is to be active participants in that healing, to begin to work within the framework of God's natural systems and design, to set up and modify the way we function to be in line with the natural world. And so we have earth care, people care, fair share, and today, self-care. Now, you might think that self-care is a no-brainer, right? Considering the amount of energy that we put into preserving ourselves and relaxing ourselves and indulging ourselves. We consume more of everything than any other nation in the world as individuals and as a people, so we should be okay in this department. Yet our emotional health, our physical health, our spiritual health still suffers and ranks among the worst in the world. And I'm not here today to tell you about self-care, meaning you're going to sign up for yet one more yoga class or meditate more or eat organic, although you should, and eat and get more exercise, right? You're all over-programmed as it is. You all have too many expectations on yourself. And getting another layer of guilt slapped on you by your pastor is not going to help. So everybody take a breath. It's not that kind of sermon. And here's the thing, we know what to do, right? We know what to do to make the human in us and to be more like God created us to be. But we just don't. We know how important it is to carve out time to be alone with our Maker, to spend time in nature, to connect with others, to give to others, to move our bodies more, to feed our intellect as well as our soul. We know that we have to give thanks, our time, our talent, and all glory to God. We know. We know that we are to live a life worthy of our calling. Yet there's a disconnect. Some would call it sin. We miss the mark on what God desires for us, and we do something else. And it's not from lack of trying, right? We can exhaust ourselves trying to live up to some measure of what we think God desires for us. We can exhaust ourselves with our own self-care and trying to manage the balance between all the things we have to do and all the things we want to do and all the things we think we're supposed to do. On top of that, somewhere along the line, we learned or got burned into thinking that we're better off being in charge of our own self, and that giving over trust to anyone, including God, will leave us helpless and insecure. So we trust in our own power, or the power of others who have convinced us that they know best and that they can keep us safe. In the process, we block our own spirit. We can block from hearing from God. We can become more difficult. It can become for us more difficult to find and know and care for our authentic self if we even remember who that is. We have trouble hearing from God, calling us back to God's self, to live in fullness of spirit and life. The prophet Jeremiah saw the people of Judah struggling with the very same thing, so entrenched in trusting only in themselves and in the gods of the world that their sin, he says, is written with an iron pen, a diamond point engraved it on the tablets of their heart. They've made altars and taught their children to worship the gods of the earth and to do all of this worship right alongside nature, the green tree and the high hills and the mountain and the open country. What a comparison. Here's God right here, known to us through creation, as we talked about last week, showing us all of this can work. I've designed all of this to work, drawing us to wholeness as one with creation, and instead people choose the gods of the earth. And Jeremiah warns them flat out what will become of them, what will happen because of their actions. They are, in essence, shooting themselves in the foot. They're going to lose it all. And they will give up everything God has given them, their inheritance, this richness of living, and they've traded it for the promise of wealth and power and security. But guess what? They didn't receive any of those things. They've gotten now only sorrow, only pain, and now they're going to live out the consequences of their actions. They're going to be taken over by another tribe. They'll be subjugated. They'll be oppressed. And they don't realize they've given it away themselves. And God will let it happen. Not because God doesn't want to protect them or can't protect them or wants to see them suffer, but because this is what they chose. And God stands in the midst of them. And God suffers with them as they suffer. And God continues to call them back, to restore relationships, to renew the covenant. And God uses examples from creation to illustrate this point. Those who trust in mere mortals, says God, and make mere flesh their strength are doomed. They are like a shrub in the desert, living in the parched places. But those who trust in God, those who trust is God, are blessed. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. In other words, being all God has designed them to be, working in harmony with other living things while being their authentic self, a tree being a tree. This is God's desire for us, to work in harmony, being our authentic selves and living with other things. Yes? So, if we can agree on all of that, I'm going to bring up then a subject that might be delicate to many. Last week, we talked about the importance of accepting ourselves exactly as we are, as we do almost every week. We talked about it in the context of whatever our sexual attraction is or gender identification, and I took apart one of the passages from Romans 1 that has been used by the church to condemn the LGBTIA+ community. I bring it up because that passage and others like it are only one way the church has convinced people to feel unworthy and broken and less than, and not acceptable to God. We've talked over the years about other passages that have been used through the ages to condone abuse, slavery, racism, sexism, consumerism, nationalism, discrimination, and violence, among others. The institution of church, married to the empire for so long, sadly came to interpret Scripture in a way that would keep both the institution and the empire fat and full. Meanwhile, the victims of said abuses, physical, sexual, emotional, were denied the help they needed and denied access to finding the fullness of joy in God. Some forced to stay in abusive relationships and situations, denied acceptance and inclusion, continuing in shame and pain, all sanctioned by the institution we call church. Hear me. Anytime someone or something denies you living into your authentic, godly self in any relationship, even under the cloak of religion, is abuse. There's a relatively new area of study, came around 2011, called religious trauma syndrome. Anyone heard of it? It's recognized as a set of symptoms by the psychiatric and psychological communities, ranging in severity, experienced by those who have participated or left behind authoritarian, dogmatic, and controlling religious groups and belief systems. Now, you would think this would be something like a cult, right? Or some strict fundamentalist body. But I tell you sincerely, this can happen anywhere. As we've talked about this before, if you grew up in a religious atmosphere where you felt fearful of God, fearful of the afterlife, fearful of what was going to happen to you should you even dare leave that church, if your theology was laced in guilt and shame instead of acceptance and forgiveness and love, it damaged part of you. And it can serve to keep us from accepting ourselves and others just the way we are. And we don't like to think about the church doing that, right? We don't like to think about, especially the churches of our childhood, doing something harmful. But when you've been indoctrinated with a belief system where your very life is at stake, that's a threat. It's a threat. And your response will be similar to any other threat. And you'll respond with things like PTSD or CPSD, betrayal trauma. Symptoms include cognitive, the way we think. It makes us think differently. Affective, meaning the way we sense and see the world. Functional, the way we act. And social, cultural interaction. Can even give us delays in our development, emotional, physical, sexual. The damage goes far beyond the spiritual level, and it can affect even the way we interact with our loved ones and the world. It stops us from being our authentic self. We end up like that shrub in the desert Jeremiah was talking about, living in the parched places, not able to see even when relief is offered. Please don't live like that. If you believe you suffered religious trauma, please don't stay silent. It is not your fault. It is not your fault. Like anybody else who has faced any kind of abuse, sexual, physical, emotional, there is a perpetrator and there is a victim. You don't need to be alone in your shame, in pain. Don't suffer in silence. Maybe that's part of the self-care sermon that is here today. Maybe it's what we need more of in self-care, that we can bring what we've kept hidden and in the dark into the front and in the light and share it with somebody we trust so that they can help us work through it. Maybe naming the things that have happened to us or the things that we've gone through help us get to healing. And I know it's not easy to go back through pain. Who wants to do that? Nobody wants to go back and think about the names people called us or the things people did to us or the emotional hurts we've incurred or the exclusion or the rejection that we just grew to accept, the fear that we kept and just internalized. But I know this. It's worth it. And I know this for those who are suffering still. God is standing with us. That whatever you've gone through that's made you feel like you were broken and separate, anything that you've gone through that keeps you from hearing and the loving voice of God calling you back, or whatever broken image you have of yourself that you think defines you, let me tell you the truth. God has never stopped loving you. God has never stopped loving you. God has never stopped loving you. There is nothing you can do to even make that happen. Nothing. No matter what anybody tells you. This is living out God's design for us. Accepting the love that God offers. Accepting the help that others can give. Living the life that God offers is just allowing ourselves to be a tree. Be who we are. Receiving all the love that God and God's people can give. Rooting ourselves in that living water and living beyond ourselves. It's not just for some. It's for all. God bless you today.